All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials World podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? It's 2024. Of course, a few years back, we had a just incredible, gigantic movement to just end police violence and end police corruption that was clearly very successful, right? But, I've been thinking, we've been having an uptick of crime because, of course, fucking police abolition happened, defund the police absolutely happened, as we all know.
Oh, you don't have to tell me. I'm in Portland. It's been a cinder.
Shit, dude. I mean, last time I visited you, straight up, I went to your apartment and it was literally ashes. It was ridiculous.
I'm paying rent on a literal burnt out building.
And you know what? I've been thinking, right? Like, we need to bring back a cop who just violates everybody's civil rights, doesn't really care about the law in any kind of conceivable way, and just fucks whatever woman walks his way and is, for some reason, always super attracted to him. Does that sound like something that would fix this disgusting country, Brian?
We got to do something, because I swear, if there's one more day of me walking down the street and not having to see cops just racing up and down downtown Portland, just menacing homeless people, I don't know if I can take it. I might have to move.
Exactly. And I think we have a really interesting film that actually details the type of individual that would fix this country, made by our favorite Hollywood lib.
Tom Laughlin.
Tom Laughlin, yes. But yes, our favorite Hollywood lib, James Woods. So, you know what? Let's just get right into the fucking review here. So this is our review of the 1988 film Cops, or Cop, I should say, not Cops. Cops is a TV show. But, speaking of 1988, I think James Woods agrees with the numbers 88. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so without further ado, let's get into our review here. But before we get into our review, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Millennial Generational Moment of the Week.
Week.
Woo! Yeah! All right. And, we're talking about cops. We're talking about a cop. And I think, Brian, you had a very interesting idea for our Cringe Generational segment for this week. Is that correct? Speaking of cops.
So I had decided probably just about a week ago to review this for the pod, and I kind of had an idea what I wanted to do to tie in for the generational theme, but it turned out way better thematically than I could have thought. So I've spent the last 3 days on and off watching a lot of compilations of top influencer TikToks. I did watch a few compilation videos with commentary by leftist YouTube people, but I tried mostly to avoid that, to just watch the face value. This is what these cops think is cool. And here's what I found. So what do you think, if you were a cop, how would you want to be seen? Probably as, very diligent and kind of maybe stoic, maybe a little bit sensitive, but, very dignified, right? That's the image that assuming that you're a reactionary person that wants to be a cop, that's probably what you'd want to put out there, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely like the fucking Punisher logo with the Blue Lives Matter flag on it and stuff.
Well,
100%.
Yeah, that, and maybe even just self-serious, some level of dignity. None of them want that. They all want to be a Chris Pratt in a Marvel movie. They're all incredibly soy. So found an abundance of male police officers posting just themselves looking weepy into the camera while some sad country song plays. And then there's text that says, "Women don't want to date me because I'm a cop. Will I be alone forever?" I found no shit. Probably 6 different, TikToks by different officers. Just, "Why don't any women love me? I'm so lonely even though I'm a cop." One of my favorite things was this guy who was posting, "For every 50 likes I get on this video, I will write out a warning instead of a traffic violation for the next person I pull over," which can't be all right?
Yeah. Honestly, if the chief of police finds that, he's absolutely getting fucking chewed out. I mean, won't get fired, but he'll get chewed out for fucking sure.
Goofy bullshit. Of course, normal TikTok shit, lip syncing, dancing, which whatever. That's what you do on TikTok. But it just got me thinking, older propaganda, as people with our types of politics like to say, was offensive, right? Dirty Harrys, your cops, anything like that. But it was made by professionals, by writers, directors, and actors who had an ideological message they were putting forth using their talents to do. But now the cops have grassroots access to the means of production to make their own propaganda. You'd think maybe it would be more intense. Maybe it would be more unfiltered. And I guess in a way it is. But what you find is they all just want to be like dumbasses.
Yeah, they all want to be like fucking shitty YouTube influencers, like 15-year-old YouTube influencers.
And so it is generationally, the videos I saw run the gamut, there's good amount of Gen Xers and maybe even some older Zoomers, which is crazy to think of. But it is all incredibly millennial coded. And it got me thinking about the way that the propaganda of the state kind of morphs to be more appealing to different kind of demographics. Because I'm just thinking, after watching this movie, and I've watched a lot of movies like this, I'm going to be honest, I like a lot of shitty vigilante cop movies. I think it's an entertaining genre, and it's frankly kind of funny and insane. But then you watch these things and you're like, oh, this is what the cop people want to see now, right? They want to see cops lip syncing to XXXtentacion. Which, Taylor, why do you think there might be some problems with cops listening to XXXtentacion?
Well, I mean, first off, he was
just give me the first thing that pops into your head.
The thing I think of is that he like almost murdered his girlfriend.
Yeah, domestic abuser, admitted intense domestic abuser,
and died at like 21 in like a gang shootout or something.
Yeah, but like they love him, or at least they love lip syncing to his songs.
I mean, cops have a lot of commonality with domestic abusers. So
well, yeah, of course. And I just thought, like, maybe these cops, maybe they need to be wrangled in, and you know, there's always going to be propaganda in this country, right? Let's not pretend that we're ever going to get rid of it. But I mean, wouldn't you rather it was at least made by professionals, by charismatic actors and clever like screenplay writers and things, rather than this TikTok thing? Because I guarantee you it's effective. There's a non-zero number of people that see these goofy dumbass cops on TikTok and they go, boy, they're not so bad. They're just like me, a dumbass.
You know, Brian, when I think of effective cop propaganda, a lot of people think of a boot on a black person's neck. But what I think of is a cop getting out of his car and just letting it go in neutral as he does the Kiki Do You Love Me dance. That's what I think of.
You know, they don't like as much country as you might think on TikTok. It is a lot of rap and a lot of trap music specifically.
That's not too surprising given the demographics of TikTok, though.
Right.
That's not too surprising given that.
Because, yeah, well, so my theory is, right, they're not hearing these songs organically. They're probably hearing them from other TikTokers, right?
Oh, yeah. It's all about...
and shit.
Yeah, it's all about, like, influencer, like, fucking leeching, for sure. That's
being mimetic and things and applying it to your own thing. And I want to point out, I do not think our subject today is necessarily effective propaganda. I almost think if I were politically inclined to agree with it, I might not like it. Whereas I like it more because it's so, like, insane.
Well, exactly. You know, we're talking about this fucking movie, this insane movie, Brian, that you wanted us to watch, which I want to be clear, I fucking love this movie. But this movie's absolutely insane. So let's get into some of the details of this real quick. So once again, it came out in 1988. And I'm kidding. I don't think that's James Woods' favorite number, but I would be very surprised if it was. The 88 part, obviously. It was rated R.
Not the 19-year-old part?
I'm pretty sure he likes a lot of, well, maybe take off the one part. I bet not. Never mind. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't accuse him of being a Nazi chomo, but I mean, he's friends with probably a lot of them. I'll just say that.
Well, if you're working in Hollywood, you know.
That's a good point, yeah. But anyways, this movie is rated R. It was directed by James B. Harris. It was written by him as well. And it was based on the novel Blood on the Moon by James Ellroy. And the first trivia fact I have here is the novel Blood on the Moon, upon which the movie is based, was rejected by 17 publishers due to its violent content. So I think that's very interesting. And we'll definitely talk about the violent content in this movie because I can certainly see why it was rejected for quite a while.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of it, but it is, for the type of movie it is that this is, it's pretty rough when it gets there.
100%, yeah. And then this movie was produced by James B. Harris and James Woods. So the individuals involved are all named James, which I think is very hilarious. The three James were involved in making this fucking movie. And
you think one of them went by Jimmy during the production?
Yeah, Jim, was that Jim, James, and Jimmy? Yeah, we'll go with that. Yeah. And the next trivia fact I had here is writer, producer, director James B. Harris and James Woods both worked for Scale on this film in order to get it made. So Scale, I had to look this up because I had no idea what it meant, but Scale essentially just means working for Hollywood minimum wage. So they worked for Hollywood minimum wage just to get this movie made, which I think is really fascinating.
Well, it makes sense, though, because, and of course we'll get into it, but Taylor, you and I have been talking about it for days, this movie is so front-loaded with ideology.
Yeah, even in 1988, I have a real hard time believing that this movie would have like been a box office success. And I think studios realized that. So James Woods and fucking James Harris were like, we will do anything to get, we will please, we will do anything to get this movie made. And that was like the fucking like that was the gambit they had to make for sure. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, because like with Dirty Harry, you've got some plausible deniability as a viewer. Obviously, that's right wing, it's reactionary, but it's a neutral enough on its face that you could watch it as like a lib or whatever and be like, it's just a story, right?
Not this movie though. Not fucking this movie at all.
Not Cop.
Not Cop. And then, so James B. Harris is primarily a producer. He is most well known for either producing, writing, or directing such films as The Killing. I believe that is the
Kubrick.
I thought it was Hitchcock, but it might be Kubrick.
The Kubrick heist movie. I mean, there's a couple movies called The Killing. That's just the first one that I.
Okay, yeah, it's a Kubrick movie. It's a Kubrick movie. He also was the producer of Paths of Glory, which I don't know if you've ever seen Paths of Glory, a phenomenal film.
I have not.
Oh, it's honestly, you know what? This might be a controversial take. It's actually my favorite Kubrick movie. I'm not joking. It's really
it's one of the only
good.
Kubrick movies. I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen Barry Lyndon. The Killing is one of my favorite Kubrick movies, too. Maybe we should do a double feature at some point.
Yeah, I have not seen that one, but yeah, I would say Paths of Glory is probably easily my favorite Kubrick movie. It's got one of the best war scenes of any movie of all time, and it's, came out in 1957. It's crazy.
Is that his second feature?
I believe so. Well,
because his first one was like a teleplay, right?
Didn't Spartacus come out in like the early 50s or something, or am I thinking of a different?
I thought Spartacus was in the 60s. I'm not sure. I'm not like a Kubrick like expert, to be honest.
Yeah, obviously I'm not either. I've seen a good amount of his movies, but I haven't seen, I would say, probably about a third of them.
Yeah, so probably the same for me. And I'm not like a student of Kubrick the way some people are,
Yes, it was his second narrative film, Paths of Glory was. Or, no, wait, yeah, there we are.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Because to me, so the earliest one I've seen is The Killing. And it's kind of interesting how you can watch it at that early stage, and he seems so fully formed as the Kubrick that we think of. So it would be interesting to see something even earlier than that.
Yeah, for fucking sure. He was also the producer on Lolita, which is, of course, another Stanley Kubrick movie. The Bedford Incident, this film, and his very last producer credit was the Brian De Palma movie, The Black Dahlia, which is, of course, the biopic, or I should... Yeah, about the Black Dahlia murder. I've not seen that movie, but I love Brian De Palma, so I would 100% be willing to see that at some point.
It's all right. It basically, imagine De Palma in the 2000s. It's extremely 2000s, and it's extremely De Palma.
That's a very interesting idea. I don't think I've actually seen any De Palma's movies post, like, the 90s, I mean,
no one has.
Yeah, no one... Well, to be fair, I think Black Dahlia actually did pretty well at the box office. So
yeah, that was actually, I think that was, and I think a lot of the true crime buffs still like that movie. It's okay. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm literally looking up his filmography right now, Brian De Palma post 2000, and except for Black Dahlia, a whole lot of motherfucking nothing. So, a whole lot of fucking nothing. So, oh, good Lord. That's all for James Harris. And James Woods, I think I described him in the fucking script here as a chud crank actor, and that is 100% what he is at this point. Like, James Woods has had a very interesting turn. I would say a pretty common turn for a lot of Hollywood people post 9/11, because he was very influenced in his post 9/11 crank years by 9/11 for sure. He's one of those Dennis Miller type guys who saw 9/11 and was like, I'm a reactionary now.
Pre 9/11, there was some degree for a lot of these guys of being like, yeah, I'm kind of conservative, but I'm also a Hollywood guy. And, I'm kind of anti-authoritarian, or I'm kind of snarky. I don't know if James Woods was ever there, but he definitely got a lot more mask off post 9/11. Although watching this, he was clearly always there.
Yeah, that's I've read a little bit about his political views, not obsessively, but I was always was he always like this? And from what I understand, he was always kind of a liberal-ish Republican, and then 9/11 made him just become a complete crank. And he swears that he saw some of the 9/11 hijackers months before 9/11 happened. He claims that, which is hilarious.
I believe that he believes that. I believe that in his paranoid brain that's making all these weird connections, that he saw some Arab people, and it's convinced that that's who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, they weren't even fucking Saudi, or they're Azerbaijani or something.
Right. I believe that he believes
Oh, for fucking
In the
sure.
same way that I believe that Wahlberg believes he could have stopped it.
Or that Seth MacFarlane could have made them like fucking laugh enough so they get distracted while Mark Wahlberg took them all down.
Oh my God, we should make that like script.
Yeah, he does like the fucking Brian
Oh.
and Stewie voice.
Super team. So James Woods is on the ground and he sees them boarding the plane in the airport and he alerts Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg, who then team up mid-air to fight the terrorists.
100% Brian, if I was like ever a Jeff Bezos billionaire, I would make this movie. I'm not joking. This would be a hilarious movie that would make $30 at the box office. Like nobody
Seth
would see
MacFarlane
it.
might do it too.
Yeah. But it was so James Woods is most well known for acting in such productions, and there's a lot of them. But his first major role was in the 1978 Holocaust miniseries, just literally called Holocaust, which I think is very interesting. He also acted in a movie called The Onion Field, Videodrome, which is my personal favorite James Woods movie. I fucking love
great.
Videodrome. Once Upon a Time in America, Against All Odds, this film, of course, The Hard Way, Straight Talk, another great performance, Casino. He's fucking awesome in Casino.
No, it's awesome. I mean, it's as underrated as a film like that can be, but I'd say it's fairly underrated.
Oh, yeah. In all honesty, like, you know, as I said earlier with Passive Glory being my favorite Kubrick film, I think that Casino is probably my favorite Scorsese movie. I think it's fucking great.
It is great. I don't quite agree with that, but I do think it's a great movie.
And, you know, he's such a varied director that, I mean, okay, I will say Gangs of New York. I didn't like Gangs of New York, but I've liked every other Scorsese movie I've seen. So
Gangs of New York is fine. I just think it's boring.
Yeah, I agree. He was also in Ghosts of Mississippi, Hercules, Vampires. Oh my God, I fucking love Vampires. We will absolutely have to watch Vampires one day because that movie is fucking awesome.
I haven't seen that probably since like 5th grade.
It
used to be on cable all the time.
I think I saw it maybe about a year ago, so pretty recently. And he was also in The Virgin Suicides. John Q. Surfs Up, you know, the family film Surfs Up, beyond a couple of the other movies. White House Down, and so many more. He's just been in a million fucking movies. Although, to be honest, after his post 9/11 crank years, not a whole lot of quality films, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Was he in that weird Ben Shapiro produced Roe versus Wade movie that came out a couple years ago?
I don't think so, but I would not be shocked if he was in it.
See, I thought he was, but that might have been a false memory.
You know, I'm going to look this shit up right now because I really hope. Nope, he was not. Thank fucking God he was not in there. Of course, Stacey Dash, our favorite actress, was in that movie.
Seth Green was in it.
Yeah, and fucking Jamie Kennedy was in it too.
Jamie Kennedy, that's it.
Yeah, it is so fucking funny, dude. Oh, Jesus Christ. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, of course, the content of this film. So this movie has a length of about 110 minutes. It had a budget of about $5 to $7 million, and it only grossed $1.9 million, which, to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised the movie grossed any amount of money because this is a very unpleasant film, especially for 1988. I'm surprised anybody wanted to see this movie. Like, even though I like it a lot, this is a very unpleasant movie for 1988.
The way that it portrays the worldview of the people that it's trying to get on board, which is like pro-cop, crime paranoid conservatives, it makes their worldview look so whacked out while trying to appeal to them that I can't imagine them in a mass level flocking to it.
No, absolutely fucking not. Like, never mind. We'll get into that when we get to the synopsis, I promise. But yeah, we're definitely going to talk about James Woods' character in here because there's so much pathology going on here. Like, so much psychosexual shit with this movie. It's crazy.
A true maniac.
This person makes like fucking Jordan Peterson psychosexual issues look normal.
This is like a Peterson-esque like archetype.
Yeah. Speaking of, so on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has an 83% critic score and a 49% audience score. So this is the first movie I've seen in a while that had a significant audience like dip versus critics. I'm kind of surprised by that, to be honest with you.
My guess with that is I would bet that the critics that reviewed this at the time, and maybe even since then, were already inclined to like its politics. Maybe they just happened to skew more conservative. Maybe they even wrote for some like conservative outlet, you know, whereas your random audience member that sees this movie, you have at least a 60% chance of them watching this and being like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, even in fucking Reagan America, they'd be like, what the fuck is this?
Well, so to be clear, and we'll get to it, but just to set the stage, it's not the pro-copness necessarily, it's the gender stuff.
Oh, yeah,
That's
I
the thing
mentioned,
that I think even for a lot of like conservatives, I think might turn them off.
oh yeah,
Not morally so much, but because it's so kind of sleazy and like you said, psychosexual that they might be like, ugh.
yeah. Well, speaking of, so I think that leads right into our synopsis here. So, movie begins with LAPD Detective Sergeant Lloyd Hopkins, played by once again James Woods, discovers the brutal murder of a young woman. And there's a little bit of setup before then. There's like a guy calling the police, like 911, like, oh man, you should see this shit. I actually had the line here. At one point, he says, some heavy shit went down in there, man. Something out of a Peck and Paw movie, which is just so awesome. I love that line. Like, the second I heard that line, I'm like, okay, I'm going to fucking love this movie.
That's
Like,
a little something for the film bros out there.
and I can't even really describe the way he's like, yeah, man, like heavy shit went down there. It's like a Peck and Paw movie. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, really? I hope they paid that guy a lot of money to say that. It's so fucking funny. Like,
Out of place. Like, does the
yeah.
target audience for this care about Peck and Paw?
And also, like in 1988, were there really like a lot of people like on the street who knew who the fuck Peckinpah was?
Well, no,
or,
I
like,
think
cared about him?
This must have been a thing that James Woods wanted in there because he thought it made him sound. It was like going to be a little something for like people to go like, oh, that's funny, like film nerds, right?
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, there's another actually really funny Peckinpah reference in a Nick Cage movie called Deadfall. And you've never seen Deadfall, right, Brian?
No.
Oh my God. That movie is the most Nicolas Cage movie of all time. Like, it is incredible. He plays his character like he's always on cocaine. It's awesome. And at one point, he like catches a guy, like, he's like, who sent you? Who sent you? And the guy goes, Sam fucking Peckinpah. And I'm like, okay, first off, Nick Cage's brother made that movie, and he's like a big film nerd. And I'm like, okay, you put that in there because you're a fucking film nerd and you want to name drop Peckinpah, all right? Nobody really thinks Sam Peckinpah sent this guy to murder Nick Cage, all right? That's not what happened. Like, ridiculous.
Well, that doesn't even make, like, that line serves no purpose, right? Other than to name drop Peckinpah.
So I've literally heard Sam Peckinpah's name get name dropped in 2 different movies, and they make no sense. But anyways, so he discovers the brutal murder of a young woman. Hopkins notices a great detail of feminist literature with titles like Rage in the Womb on her bookshelf.
What's the name of the author? What is it, Taylor?
Van Dyke?
Something Ham like that? Van Dyke.
I didn't even catch that until you just were like, I'm like, oh, there we go. But anyway, and I tried looking up that author. I'm like, is this a real book? And I wasn't able to find anything. So I was like, oh, God damn it. They literally made this once again, very interesting sexual pathology this movie has. Like just a novel that exists. And I'm like,
It's a polemic about the rage against men is how a feminist character describes it.
Yeah. He also sees 2 classified ads for anonymous sexual encounters, which I also put that on there. And the opening line is, your fantasy or mine, / let's get together and rap. And I'm like, did rap mean something different? And get together and like, hey, my name is a girl and I'm here to say, like, what the fuck?
So that bothered me too, because of course you can say, let's rap, like, let's get together and let's talk. But I don't think anyone's ever used rap as a euphemism for like casual sex.
Yeah, what the fuck? Like, the closest thing I can think of is like wrap it up, like wrap your dick up in a condom.
But it's spelled differently.
Yeah, bizarre. But I had to write that on there because I'm like, did they literally just say, let's get together and rap about like some random, like fucking pre-Craigslist sexual encounter? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I feel like you would say something a little like, I don't know, you'd say like, let's get together and have some fun.
Yeah, exactly. Just very interesting. So when he returns home, his 8-year-old daughter wakes up and begs him for a story. He launches into a profane description of one of his cases, and she's like just very excited about it. And I'm just like, James Woods, what the fuck are you doing?
See, but she's a cool, smart kid, so she's like tough, and she likes hearing about how her dad busts the sickos.
I can tell you what, when I was 8 years old, Brian, I really wanted to hear about a fucking guy who just like beats up rapists. That's what I really wanted to hear when I was 8 years old.
Yeah, I wanted to hear a story about a Facebook guy.
Yeah. His wife orders him to stop, and they have an argument over the inappropriateness of his stories. Frustrated, and I also love this rant, by the way, because like there's so much in there. He's like, you know what? There's a lot of disillusionment of these young girls. They're gonna get beaten up and raped if I don't tell them about me beating up rapists. Like, it's deranged. It makes no sense.
From this point onward, so the whole thing is he's like, hey, they're all innocent little girls, and they're like don't know what the danger they're in, and they all end up raped or murdered, and I don't want her to be like that. And like, we are not doing it justice. this. From this moment on, I swear to God, about once every 30 minutes, James Woods stops acting, looks at the screen, and says, "Women are being raped because of feminism."
Yeah, Brian, you're not exaggerating. This movie is very anti-feminist, but very anti-feminist in a movie that, like, I didn't even know existed of anti-feminism. Yeah. Like, it's like level 20, like, anti-feminist. It's crazy.
Because usually, like, misogyny in film has a long and unfortunate history, but usually it's just kind of ambient misogyny, whether it's in a comedy or an action film or a horror film, and it sucks, but it's kind of just radiated off of the culture at the time, right? This film is ideologically anti-feminist, and it's very Reagan-era conservative anti-feminist. So it's all about the idea that, like, not only can men not be men because of feminism, but the men that do get enveloped into feminism are sex perverts, and women, because of their feminist values, will be more vulnerable to them because the real men won't be able to protect them anymore. And like what we're saying here, it literally doesn't scratch the surface of how weird and layered the misogyny of this film is.
Well, talk about weird and layered. Let's get on this next scene here because there's a lot of layers to this one, too. So, frustrated, he calls up his buddy Dutch Peltz, played by the actor Charles Durning, and they go on a stakeout, which culminates with Hopkins shooting the suspect. Hopkins asks Dutch to stay at the scene and file the paperwork so that he can take the suspect's girlfriend home and have sex with her.
Dude, that's fucked up enough. It's completely psychopathic. James Woods murders this suspect and then immediately fucks the suspect's date who just watched him give...
It's crazy. So once again, we need to like really just line up the scene here. So he tells his daughter this fucking wild ass story. He yells at his wife in a misogynistic rant. He's pissed. So he's like, "Hey, let's murder some guy extrajudicially." They go up to and murder him. And then the girl that he's with is pretty unfazed. And he's like, "Hey, why don't we go back to my place and fuck?" Crazy.
There was a small detail when he's talking to his partner during the stakeout. There's an exchange of dialogue that gets lost in all the wild shit that happens right before and after, where they're talking. He's like, my wife's mad at me because I want my little girl to be prepared for the changes of the world. She's got a good head on her and she'll go far." And his elderly partner says, "You better hope she has a good pair of tits on her. She'll get farther with those."
Oh, yeah. Ooh, and honestly, though, that is the way cops talk to each other, no matter what.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Oh, Jesus. But after this, Hopkins tracks down Joni Pratt, played by the actress Randy Brooks, through the classified ads at the victim's apartment. Pratt is a washed-out actress who sells drugs and works as an escort to get by. She also hosts swinger parties, and the victim was planning on attending one of the parties to research a book. Back at the station, Hopkins opens a letter that was sent to the victim. It is a poem written in blood, which refers to, quote, "all the rest," unquote, making Hopkins think he is hunting a serial killer. He asks Dutch to get him all the files for unsolved murders of single women in the past 15 years. Only white women, though, in the past 15 years. That was a detail you mentioned. And I'm like, yeah.
So it's awesome because obviously, the way the movie is establishing it is that, we're building a profile and this serial killer specifically targets white women. But there's a scene, right, where James Woods has all of the pictures of these murdered women, these unsolved murder victims laid before him, and he flips over the pictures of every non-white woman. And I swear to God, it looks like he's going, "Don't care, don't care, don't care."
And of course, once again, cops do fucking think that for fucking sure.
I mean, it looks so much like that's what the scene's communicating.
Yeah. When he returns home, he finds a note from his wife explaining that she has taken their daughter and left. Yeah, no kidding. He is a mass murderer, cheater, piece of shit. Of course she left. And like, she has to know that not only the mass murder, she has to know that he's like murdered people, but also the cheating on top of it. And also I would argue, abusive thing that he does to his daughter. Like,
definitely abusive, but also with the cheating. So we're reading more into this movie already, I think, than the people that wrote it. Oh. He cheats so casually that there's no way that's the first time. It's not like he's like, "I got in a fight with my wife, things aren't working out, I'm feeling vulnerable," and then he fucks this lady and he shouldn't have. He immediately sees this lady after killing her date and goes, "I'm gonna fuck her."
Yeah, God, Jesus Christ. Yeah, he cheats on his wife more than like an average like French prime minister. Like, this guy cheats on his wife all the time. Pratt then phones Hopkins, and he goes over to her place to have
this is someone he's investigating.
Not only is he's like, "Man, my fucking bitch wife left me. Time to fuck a witness." oh man, my bitch wife took my kid. Time for me to rail out somebody whose murder I'm investigating, the last known person who knew her.
Taylor, I just thought of something. We could write a remake of this and we could do it totally faithful to the original, but we could make it an anti-cop satire and change like nothing.
You're totally fucking right. Like, holy shit. Oh, God. After narrowing down the unsolved murders to a few cases, Hopkins summons Deputy Sheriff Delbert Whitey Haynes, played by the actor Charles Hayde, to a meeting and brusquely interrogates him about 2 suicides that took place on June 10th, a year apart on his beat.
A guy who doesn't act sketched out or suspicious at all.
Yeah, and also
a guy who gives off totally normal vibes.
I also love that scene because it has another one of my favorite lines in this movie. He says, "I'm surprised." He talks about like he works in West Hollywood, which isn't actually part of Los Angeles. It's like a separate community, like city. It's also known for having probably the longest like lasting gay community in Los Angeles County. Like a lot of gay people in there. But he says, "Oh, I'm surprised you worked that beat. West Hollywood is a faggot sewer, isn't it?"
There's no reason to say that. Because, okay, the misogyny sucks. It's obviously, it makes you cringe. It makes your skin crawl at times. It really does in this film. And I'm not particularly sensitive to offensive stuff. But this line, the fags who are line, doesn't serve any purpose in the story. You could argue the misogyny serves some purpose in the story. That line is just there for him to say, West Hollywood is,
Yeah, exactly. Hopkins then goes to Haynes' apartment and discovers a wiretap which has captured Haynes dealing drugs. In the process of canvassing a feminist bookstore for leads, and also I know there was the feminist book, I understand that, but like just the idea is like, this dumb broad loves feminism. Let me go to a rad fem books. It's very funny.
The first feminist bookstore, he goes like, she'll know something about it.
Hopkins visits one run by Kathleen McCarthy, played by the actress Leslie Ann Warren, who agrees to accompany him to a party at Dutch's house. Over the course of the evening, culminating in a long conversation back in McCarthy's house, she reveals a high school trauma where she was gang raped by a group of boys who were hostile towards her feminist book club. She reveals to Hopkins that an anonymous suitor has sent her flowers and a poem every year. Looking through her old yearbook, Hopkins is stunned to find a picture of Whitey and a male prostitute nicknamed Birdman, whose name was mentioned on the surveillance tapes made at Whitey's apartment. Now, there's also another just absolutely phenomenal line when she's like detailing the rape to him, where he says, "Hey, I got through the rape okay. I might as well go for the whole enchilada." I'm like, just incredible. There's so many incredible lines in this movie.
I know. Literally just a fantasy about how a chick could unload about her trauma to you and you could be like, that's cool, whatever, and she'd fuck you.
Oh my God. Honestly, I bet you anything, if Red Pill guys had any media like knowledge, they would fucking love this movie. I guarantee you they would love this movie.
I'm going to say it, and this is an offensive movie. It's disgusting. It's pretty evil, to be honest. This movie is too entertaining for those guys to like, I think. Because there is like humor in this movie and like a degree of camp, and that's what those guys don't like, I think.
No, that's true. But I would say the one connection is that he's negging all these women.
Oh, yeah.
All of them.
Oh, no, he is definitely a Chad in the context of the movie.
It's fucking awesome. I love this movie. All right. And then later on, Birdman turns up dead in a motel room. The wall is smeared with blood and the motto from McCarthy's high school is written in the stains. Hopkins returns to Whitey's apartment and surprises him as he comes home, carrying Birdman's police file. Whitey claims Birdman is his snitch, but Hopkins knows that Whitey was running drugs and male prostitutes through Birdman. I just love this whole scene. So yeah, he's basically like holding him up, being like, "I know your secret. Tell me everything." And then of course he's got a gun up against him. And I think we can all agree, Brian, that if somebody has a gun up against you and is threatening you, the confession is always completely justified. It's not coerced at all.
It's going to be genuine. They're not just saying anything they can think of in that moment to not be shot in the face.
I think it's interesting, though, that a cop is doing cop tactics to another cop. I think that's very interesting. Like, he's being incredibly brutal and, like, violating his civil rights, but to another piece of shit cop. I think that's really interesting.
The truth is, and this is what this movie believes, cops should do that wantonly. They should do it constantly. That's the only way that they can truly be effective.
That's the thing. As long as you have a hunch, that's all you need. That's all you need.
They should push a gun in your face, and they will get exactly what they need out of you.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. This movie really is like the precursor to like fucking Law and Order, but obviously Law and Order is much cleaner in presentation than this movie. But Law and Order essentially says the same thing. Like, fuck your rights. We have a theory and we're going to make sure it happens. But yeah, so we were talking about, he puts a gun to Whitey's head and gets him to confess to raping McCarthy with Birdman in high school. Whitey offers information on police corruption to get off the hook. Then he tries to surprise Hopkins with a shotgun, but Hopkins kills him. I also love that because like, I gotta piss. let me piss first. He's like, that's fine. And then he like goes to the fucking like kitchen or whatever. And yeah, he brings out the shotgun. He's like, hey, over here. And then he like shoots him. And then he like the fucking shotgun goes off. And it's like, okay, first off, like obviously that would be like justifiable in that case, I guess, if you like really were to like, fucking really.
Yeah, he came out with the shotgun, sure.
Yeah, twist the details, sure. But like, if you're getting this on audio record, they're going to hear the 3 gunshots with your handgun and then the shotgun blast. Like, come on, dude. You're very clearly implicated in setting this guy up to murder him. Like,
yeah, none of that audio, I don't think, would be admissible.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, not only would the coerced confession, but then on top of it, the shooting him before he gets a shot off, but with no video evidence, he would be fucked in court.
Well, he'd get like 2-week vacation for that.
Yeah, he'd get a 2-week paid vacation. But okay, though. He did kill another cop, though. That does make things a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. And they might not like that because that means that they can't trust him to let them get away with shit, maybe.
Yeah, and he's already kind of a pain in the side of the police chief, so he might go to prison for that one. He might.
Well, everyone knows he has a wild hair up his ass about murdered women. That's one of the funniest lines in the movie to me.
It is such a good fucking line. I love it.
You've got a real pet peeve about murdered women.
Yeah, that's a real hobby horse of yours.
You're really up on your soapbox about those murdered women again.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. But anyway, so Dutch tells Hopkins to lie low while the mess he has created is sorted out. Oh, yeah, you fucking think? Pratt then invites Hopkins over for sex. But when he gets there, she has been murdered and placed on the stove in the position that she last had sex with Hopkins. Yeah. I also find this interesting because we didn't mention it, obviously, in the scene where they're fucking, but it like pans over to another room with like a crack in the door. And it's very clear the killer was there and like taking a picture of it.
Yep. That is actually, as silly as this movie is, as mostly unfrightening as the murders in it are, the idea of having this woman murdered in the same position that she was having sex with another man, and the murderer is always like watching like them fuck. Like that is actually, I think, a pretty chilling detail.
Yeah, it really is. Like, that was a moment where I'm like, okay, they're panning, and then I saw the crack in the door, and I'm like, oh, I bet you anything, the murderer or somebody's fucking watching. And I didn't know who it was, obviously, but I was like, gonna guess maybe an important character is watching through the crack of that door. At the station, Hopkins and Dutch get McCarthy to go through the yearbook against a cross-reference of suspects. They are interrupted by the supervisor, played by the actor Raymond J. Barry, who suspends Hopkins. When Hopkins returns to the interrogation room, he sees that McCarthy has run to a phone booth across the street. Also, the interrogation scene is hilarious. She's like, I'm not going to say anything with the psycho in here. And he's like, listen, you're a feminist, but you don't care about these murdered women that try to cover up this guy. And then at some point she's like, I won't say anything unless he shuts the fuck up. And he's like, okay, he's going to shut the fuck up. Like, it's just an awesome scene. I love it. Everybody's fucking yelling and angry at each other. It's almost like a comedy scene, to be honest with you. Like, that's how it reads to me.
There's definitely like to some degree, a knowing element of like comedy and farce to this.
Yeah, it's really fucking funny. Yes. I just love that line. He's like, I won't leave it till he shuts up. And he's like, I'll make sure he shuts up. It's so good. I love it. Anyways, so McCarthy runs to the phone booth. She calls Bobby Franco, played by the actor Stephen Lambert, who was in the poetry club with her, warning him that Hopkins is dangerous and will suspect that he is the killer. She realized Franco has sent her poems every year, and she refused to believe that he could be a murderer. When Hopkins grabs the phone, she hears Franco threaten him and realizes that he is in fact the killer. Franco and Hopkins agree to meet at the high school where they have a shootout at the gym. And also, I love that, by the way, because I bet you like fucking Ronnie Radke watched this. He's like, oh shit, this is awesome.
Yeah, shit.
Anybody who doesn't know that reference, please look up fucking Ronnie Radke high school shootout. Trust me, it's a pretty horrible story. I know we just talked about Ronnie Radke on a previous episode, but never forget that no matter what you think of him, he was objectively involved in a murder at a high school. Insane. Well, and by the way, he wasn't in high school. He was like 25, and he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna sort this out at our local high school real quick. We're gonna bring
what
guns.
Was he doing there?
Well, he was looking for a new girlfriend. Let's be very... No. Although he probably was. But anyways, when Franco runs out of bullets during the shootout, he taunts Hopkins, believing that he has to lawfully arrest him. Hopkins tells Franco, and this is the end of the movie, I want to be very clear. This is how the movie ends. He says, quote, well, there's some good news, and there's some bad news. The good news is, you're right, I'm a cop, and I gotta take you in. The bad news is, I've been suspended, and I don't give a fuck, unquote. And he shoots Franco 3 times, and the movie just ends.
Happy ending.
It's awesome. I love it.
Totally unambiguous. Perfect ending.
I remember when I watched that, I literally yelled, "What the fuck?" And I was laughing for like 30 seconds because like I should have figured that's how the movie was gonna end, but I'm like, that's it? Really? And then I thought like for another 10 seconds, I'm like, no, that's awesome. That's fucking awesome.
Well, because you're kind of thinking, right, with this film that you think the ending will have something more of an explanation to exonerate our hero, to excuse what he does, but it can't even be asked to do that.
Or also just possibly explain the motives of our killer, because I know we haven't really talked about the killer, obviously, because he's kind of introduced as our first sure killer pretty much at the end of the movie. But like my interpretation was that he was like a rad femme, like feminist guy or whatever. He saw the sexual assault. It's not that he's not necessarily a feminist anymore, but he had like some weird sexual pathology that kind of got awoken in him when he saw the rape. And he had like this weird like reverse Madonna horror complex, I guess, is the way to put it.
Yeah, well, so
it's fascinating.
I think so. We were talking about this movie because we're not gonna get into like obviously yours and I believe our own personal beliefs don't reflect this movie, but I'm gonna talk about this in the universe of the movie. The movie wants us to perceive this killer as what a typical male feminist is. So the type of man that is inclined to be a feminist is going to be this weird, confused, warped, sensitive guy, right?
Who murders women in a psychosexual way that like all psychosexual serial killers do, but has the beliefs of none of them. It's bizarre. It is bizarre. Like, you know, as somebody who's like, I'm into like researching serial killers and stuff like that. And like, none of them are rad femmes. Like, none of them. They're all violent misogynists. The psychosexual ones are all violent misogynists. Like, just like, seriously. Like, they had some sexual pathology. You know, maybe their mother like beat them or did this or that or whatever. Like, I'm not excusing that, but you know what I mean? Like, they had that. And their first thought wasn't like, oh, let me read Andrea Dworkin or Gloria Steinem even on the more lib end. Like, what the fuck?
But the implication that this movie wants to put in is like, hey, ladies, you might think feminism is really cool, but it actually makes you less safe. And if you got to meet a guy who seems really cool and he's talking to you about feminism, watch out.
And I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of fucking male feminist snakes out there. I think everybody can agree on that. But like, they're not serial killers, okay? They're usually sex pests. Sometimes they're rapists. I mean, that's just the reality. But like, they're not serial killers. Like, come on. Like, fucking bizarre. And I know I mentioned this to you yesterday, but it's a lot like when chuds try to say that like a disproportionate amount of mass shooters are like trans people. And it's just like, okay, that's not categorically true in any kind of like in any category that you quantify like the amount of mass shooters. Like literally none of them. There's been like 2 trans mass shooters that I can think of. Like there was one in Tennessee like maybe a year or 2 ago. And then there was like one that was like kind of sexually ambiguous, I guess, in like Colorado. But that's all I can think of. Like no other. And even then I looked at the list of like however many mass shooters are in like a certain amount of time period. And it was like 3,000 cis ones and like 2 or 3 trans people that were confirmed to be trans people. Like it's not a common thing. It just isn't. And they say that all the time.
But the vibes make sense to them, and that's all that matters. The actual numbers, the actual reality is not important. And this is the whole thing with the reactionary like lump in mind, right? They know that the vibes are right. They can feel it. So how can you show them these numbers and tell them that's not true? They know it's true because they see all these weirdos on TV and they know that those are the people that are shooting up schools and not people like them.
Exactly. It is quite literally the definition of like the actual word reactionary or reactive. Yeah. God, but you know what? Speaking of reactive, Brian, oh my God, I got some motherfucking awesome Amazon reviews for us today from our favorite reactionary Amazon users. So there weren't that many Amazon reviews, but I found a couple good ones and like legitimately some pretty solid ones here. So our first review here is from Tyler Gann, who gives us 5 stars. And the header of the review says, excellent movie, but not for the politically correct or faint of heart. And the body of the review says, when I first saw Cop back in '88, I could not believe how tough and on the edge this action thriller was. Not to mention the film's total lack of respect for political correctness. James Woods is brilliant and in rare form here. I actually don't agree. I think he's actually in perfect form here. He's
great.
This is not a rare performance from James Woods. His 80s output is like phenomenal. It's like perfect. So I don't believe that at all. Be warned. language, action, and attitudes are frank. Characters are hardcore and flawed. This includes the hero, and nothing is censored for mainstream taste. I think you could describe him charitably as flawed. I think that's a very charitable description.
Yeah, well, what's funny is like, so let's compare this to another reactionary cop film we talked about, Dragged Across Concrete. Those characters are portrayed as flawed, right? Even though it's propaganda or whatever, right?
Those characters are far more flawed than James Hop here.
James, if this movie had any self-awareness, it would portray him as somewhat flawed, maybe a little traumatized, and then, maybe it sneaks its message in a little bit more. But nope, we're supposed to see this psycho who is basically like red-pilling his 6-year-old daughter.
Yeah, no, straight up, like, this guy is the literal definition of like a psychopath cop. Like, that's just a reality. Without remorse. And I think only solves the crime so he can, like, validate his own, like, preconceived notions. Like, I don't think he really cares that much about the victims, let's be honest with you here. Oh, God. So, yeah, the rest of you here is, and this one, this part of the review is hilarious. If you're looking for a politically correct sissy movie like the forgettable PG-13 crap they make today, where all content is watered down so that some conservative soccer mom in Utah can enjoy herself, stay away. This movie means business and does not pull any punches, which is why I love it. James Woods plays Lloyd Hopkins, a hard-boiled American police detective on the trail of a serial murderer who is victimizing women in Los Angeles. The pursuit leads him through a world that has become his own natural habitat, a nasty, uncompromising world of crime, drugs, prostitution, and male hustlers where innocence kills, according to Hopkins, and continued exposure corrupts. Paradoxically, this harsh world is also a world of love, secret admirers, romantic feminist poets, and modern chivalry. But these elements are woven underneath the tough exterior. I don't want to say too much about this movie, just this. Buy it and watch it! Definitely recommended. But it's only for cool guys who love the hard-boiled tough stuff. James Woods has never been better.
I guess here's the thing that I would agree with about this review. I think this is actually a really well-made, really entertaining movie, and it's really fun. The performances are really fun. It's crazy. It is compelling to watch at all points. So, I guess it is true that if you're like a sissy and you are offended and you need everything to be politically correct, you won't like this movie. That might be true, I guess. I mean, I feel like you and I both liked this movie, and we think it's pretty abhorrent.
Yeah, I mean, we're sissy SJW cucks, and we like this movie, even though we do think it's morally abhorrent.
Having said, but I think I would agree that, Taylor, you might agree with me, I wouldn't recommend this movie to most of my friends. And if I did, it would have a big disclaimer.
Yeah, just like I would say at least 2 out of 3, maybe all 3 Ask Craig Zoller movies, I would not recommend them to a general audience. I just would not. Oh, God. And then, speaking of people who might recommend this movie to their friends, so Mike Reeder gives this 4 stars. And the head of the review says, and this is all caps, James Woods at top of his game. And the body of the review says, a taut murder mystery with the wild and crazy James Woods as an on the edge cop. A grisly killing, a trail that leads the viewer down a dark path, a must-see, riveting. And I believe that review was written by Roger Ebert, I'm going to guess. Very well known for his yelling style.
It was so well composed that I think it must have been Ebert.
I will say, though, if somebody wanted to put this quote on, the DVD box, it would have been just fine. Honestly. Maybe not the actual description of the movie, but a trail that leads the viewer down a dark path, a must-see, riveting. That would absolutely be on, an early 2000s DVD box case, for sure. In all caps, too, and it would be, from Amazon customer on there.
Oh my God, I would love that. God, I want physical media to come back and have shitty half-baked reviews so badly.
There's this movie that I have, and it's a movie we're absolutely going to review one day. It's going to be a companion piece to something else, Brian, that I know you're going to hate. But it's this movie called Anne Be Real, which is an 8 Mile, knockoff movie about Anne Frank's diary. And one of the reviews, the only review on the box art says, this movie is like a grittier 8 Mile, and it's just credited to IMDb. Oh, God. And so our last review here is from Douglas Depke, who gives us 2 stars. And the header of the review says, subpar. And the body of the review says, 1 cup of coffee away from a psycho ward or 1 cigarette puff short of nuclear meltdown. James Woods is always a fascinating study for an audience that thrives on the unpredictable. This movie could have used more of his patented bug-eyed nuttiness. Well, actually, this movie actually has a lot of his patented bug-eyed nuttiness.
A ton of it. He is incredibly charismatic in this, and he is a bug-eyed nut. I'm not arguing with that, but truly oozing charisma.
Yeah, so I entirely disagree. I think this movie actually has a lot of it. So
Oh,
he's already
I thought you
wrong
were going to
here.
say you disagree about him being charismatic, and I was like shocked.
Oh no, I think he's fucking phenomenal. Like I said, every '80s James Woods movie, he was on the top of his game in the '80s for fucking sure. Like no question on that. So to continue on the review here, as it stands, Wood plays the role of unconventional cop in pretty conventional fashion, which, coupled with a murky, uninvolving script and slack direction, amounts to subpar and generally uninteresting slasher fare. I also don't agree with that at all. I think that's a very inaccurate opinion. I think this movie's actually pretty well shot, to be honest with you.
No, I don't ever. So this is one of the when we talk about like
This was
talented
once again,
reactionary filmmakers. It's
this
consummately well made.
this was once again early Stanley Kubrick's producer. Like this can't be poorly made. I mean, come on. I mean, it could theoretically.
Say what you will about these people, they know how to make a picture for sure.
Yeah, fucking seriously. There are moments of genuine quirkiness as when he seemingly ad-libs a cynical remark suggesting that sex rather than sensitivity is what motivates his interest in Leslie Ann Warren. But those moments are far and few between, and I suspect this film went from production directly to video release without a commercial run. That's objectively not true. This movie did have a box office run. Not a very successful one, but it did have a box office run.
Yeah, I feel like they overestimated how big the audience for this was. Because this is, like I said, this is way more ideological than Dirty Harry.
God, yes. And the last sentence here is so fucking funny. Or say the last two sentences here are so fucking funny in hindsight. Because I don't think I said it earlier. This review was written in 2002. It's a pretty old review. Not pre 9/11, which are my favorites, but, just barely post 9/11. But the last couple sentences here is, Wood should give up the lover boy fling and stick to his specialty, being the edgiest guy in Hollywood. That should be enough for anyone. And I think we've figured out that is not the way for success for James Woods. That has kind of led him astray in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, he needs to roles where he can be wacky like this, and maybe even reactionary and right wing, and then he needs some houndler to tell him to shut up when he's in public.
Yeah, he shouldn't have a publicist, for sure. He should have a obscurist. That's what he should have.
Yeah, no shit.
Oh, God. So, yes, that is our review for Cop. Do we have any final thoughts before we get to our pluggables, Brian?
So this is one of the most batshit misogynist movies I've ever seen. And I kind of think sometimes when people call, like on the left, call things propaganda, it's kind of like overstated. It's kind of like, well, we live in an imperialist capitalist country and things are going to be propaganda, so you kind of got to accept it. This is bizarre, manic, anti-feminist propaganda about how feminism is making men unable to either protect women or turning them into lady murderers. And it's making women naive to the dangers that they themselves are under, and ironically making them less safe. Key line of dialogue in the movie is, Jesus Christ, she's supposed to be a feminist. Well, you'd think she'd care about all the women being murdered by maniacs or something.
Yeah, he says that during the end interrogation scene.
Yes.
Or when she's in the interrogator's room. Right?
But I mean, I would recommend it as if you like insane, pulpy cop films, like exploitation type movies. I would recommend it. It's incredibly entertaining, but I'm not going to co-sign anything that it says about anything.
No, same. Yeah, I genuinely liked this movie a lot. I think the dialogue is hilarious. These so abhorrent actions are just they're so abhorrent, they're hilarious. And, I completely disagree with that last Amazon reviewer. I think this movie is actually pretty well made in almost every category. And we didn't really even talk about it. The practical effects and the murder scenes are phenomenal. The gore effects in this are great.
They make some kind of strike a balance between some sort of gore slasher, a peck and pot type gore, and more rounded crime procedural violence.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that reviewer. But yeah, like I said, like this movie a lot. If you can handle some extremely reactionary politics in your entertainment, go ahead. I would not recommend this to a general audience because this movie, like I said, and we've said, is very morally abhorrent and is once again an anti-feminist in a way that I didn't even know existed. It really is advanced misogynistic. It is in
or a mainstream film too. It's pretty wild.
It is. And I remember mentioning to you last night that if this movie was made today, they would have made the fucking killer guy, they would have made him trans or something. And then they would have been well, feminism leads people to transness and also sexual perversion, and they're going to murder women. And we need a cop to murder the trans serial killer feminist murderer.
Which is what the J.K. Rowling book was almost that, right? Here it's a lot more of a general, because again, we were talking about, transness hadn't become the issue of the day for the right. I don't mean to be glib about it, but like I think in the Reagan era, there's still more of a general fear about a decline in the status of masculinity, which seems so quaint now for us to look at, and that's the right's main concern. But it's more about like men aren't allowed to be men rather than I think if this movie were made today, yeah, Taylor, it would absolutely be about trans people and it would be even more insidious and even more sinister.
Yeah, that's why I thought, like, when I first watched this movie, my theory was that Birdman was like the blonde woman at the beginning, and we later learned Birdman was one of the rapists of the feminist bookstore lady. And like I said, I assumed this was going to go down like Dress to Kill route, where they ended up being like either a drag person or like an actual trans person or whatever, and we're just like murdering women because like I don't know.
Jealous.
They were jealous. Yeah. It's like I performed the sexual violence on women. Now I want to be a woman and commit more sexual violence against women, I guess. Like I said, it's just there was so much like psychosexual stuff. That's genuinely where I thought this movie was going to go, but that's not where it went. I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you.
I think your thing makes more sense from a consistent, coherent story thing. It just wasn't on the minds of conservatives in that way, I don't think.
No, that's very true.
Like,
yeah, because
so what this movie is, even though it's about gender, it's very much like a Willie Horton movie as well.
Oh, yeah. But, because, yeah, you're right. That wasn't really a thing in Hollywood yet. Like, the only movies that I can think of, the only horror movie I can think of with, like, an explicitly either trans or, like, drag, like, murderer was Dress to Kill, the Brian De Palma movie. And also, I mean, there's definitely some elements of that in, like, Psycho, for example. But
Sure. But in the way that, like, Republicans are losing their minds about it, I just don't think they were thinking about it yet,
No, not at all. And you mentioned a good point that like back then, like they would have just assumed that was like a man dressing as a woman in like drag. They would not have thought of that as like a distinct sexual identity.
So what this is, I mean, ultimately, and again, this isn't to say it's better or worse. It's absolutely sinister and at best it's mean-spirited. This is a movie about how feminism is making women stupid, blind to the dangers they face. Basically, the female lead in this movie walks right into the arms of a violent sexual killer because he's a sensitive, self-proclaimed feminist guy, or she perceives him as that. And actually, it's tough, gritty, manly men like James Woods that actually care about murdered women. And he has a wild hair up his ass about him.
Yeah. Oh, God. But yeah, so that is our review of Cop. So let's get into our pluggables here. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please follow us on both our Spotify and our YouTube channel, where we are uploading all of our content simultaneously to both platforms. And as well, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father GoFundMe. Of course, our good friends Scott, Sean, and Robert are making a phenomenal little series. They've had their first episode come out, but they need a little bit more money, a little bit more time and preparation to come out with an episode 2. And we're very excited to see the next episode in that fantastic series.
Yeah, I mean, please, again, we say it every episode. If anyone comes to Lucifer and the Father and donates from our show, from Millennials, our old Taylor and I will, within reason, we will match your donation because we want to help those guys out. They've been great friends to the show. Lucifer and the Father sounds like a really ambitious, really cool idea. We want to help them out. We want to see their series come to fruition. They've worked hard at it. And I'm sure they'll continue to work hard regardless, but we want to help out.
Absolutely. All right. And do you have any more pluggables, Brian?
Follow Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram and Millennials Are Old page on Facebook, please. Again, I'm looking for more recommendations for more cringe generational stuff. Can be boomers, zoomers, millennials are great. They're the best because I know that hours and hours of cringe are posted every day and I just can't see it all.
Yeah, God. It's like that whole, like, there's like some statistic where it's like 100,000 like hours of content are uploaded on YouTube every hour. And like, it's like, how much of that is just purely cringe? A lot of it probably is. And we're never going to be able to see the cringe.
So this is unrelated. Just speaking of classic cringe, do you remember this video of this guy who was probably in like 9th grade? He made like a video for his like girlfriend who he went to school with, and he was like, "Hey, honey, I'll see you at school tomorrow." You showed this to me like 15 years ago, and I've been trying to find it ever since.
So if it's the video I'm thinking of, there's a guy who's like maybe 10 years old and he's like, "I'm making this video for my future girlfriend." Is that the one?
Yes.
And he's like, "Okay, yep, I know. I'll send that video to you when we're done recording." It is absolutely fucking hilarious. I know exactly what video you're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been trying to remember it for years.
And you know what's hilarious is that guy later ended up being gay.
Aw, well, now I feel bad.
Oh God. But yeah, so that's the episode. And you know what, Brian? I think, talk about a cop who obviously is very above board and, of course, respects everybody's rights. I think that I'm going to interrogate my pillow very soon because I'm getting tired because we're old fucking millennials and I need to go to fucking sleep. How does that sound, Brian? You think that sounds
I
good?
very much need to go to sleep as well. I'm going to watch Cop again just so I can learn to get some of his riz.
Absolutely. Oh my God. He has the most fucking Riz. He is the Riz. If he was a Batman villain, he'd be the Rizzler. That's what he would be. Like, holy fuck. He's
Truly.
incredible. Just Sigma energy all throughout. And I think we could say that very much about James Woods in 2024. Just
Well, just
Sigma
James Woods
energy.
in general.
Yeah.
He's our guy. We love to see him.
I mean, James Woods' best friend just got sentenced to, just got convicted of 34 felonies today. So that's great.
Well, I hope he stands by him.
Yeah, I hope so. All right. But yes, everybody, have a good night. And please do not get murdered by James Woods, cop. Have a good night, everybody.